Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So good morning, everybody. I'd like to offer my greetings to everyone this morning and to thank you all for inviting me here to come and share some Dhamma, some of my experiences with everyone here. So this is actually the second time I've been to Bubs. The last time I came here was 13 years ago when I was still a junior monk. There was a very large group of very senior Thai Ajahns who were invited to come, and I was sent along to help look after them, to help Upatalk them. So most people probably wouldn't have noticed me. I was the junior monk in the background, and I definitely didn't give any Dhamma talks, because there were so many senior monks on the trip. And also, we have a kind of a standard in our Sangha that junior monks don't give Dhamma talks. But to be honest, I wouldn't have wanted to anyways. I used to be absolutely terrified of public speaking. Giving public talks was the scariest thing in the world to me. So I had, as a monk, staying in deep in the forest, I had run-ins with bears and wild boars. I'd helped catch, huge pythons before. Didn't bother me. But speaking in front of people was terrifying. Way worse than that. The first time I ever had to give a Dhamma talk was at the end of my novice pansa. So we have this, in the Luang Por Chah tradition, we have this tradition where at the end of the rains retreat, everyone who spent the rains retreat at that monastery has to give a Dhamma talk. And, we also have this kind of standard, that you shouldn't prepare for a Dhamma talk. That was I was told. Don't prepare for a Dhamma talk. Just let the Dhamma flow. So on this night, when it's my turn and I'm called to get up and give a Dhamma talk, I get up on the tamat, like the Dhamma seat, and I start my chanting. I do my Namo Tassas 3 times, and then the Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. And I freeze. I sit there absolutely silent and don't say a word. And this goes on. To me, it felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few minutes. And finally it got so awkward that all the little old village ladies started asking me questions. They're like, "Oh, Nando, where do you come from?" "Canada." "Oh, Nando, where are your parents?" "Canada." And so it didn't go so well. But the advantage of that was, after that, it's only up. You can never do worse than that, right? So then every year when it would get time to give the end of Pansa Dhamma talk, it's usually a very fun night. It's very relaxed. All the monks give talks, usually talking about themselves. It's a chance for us, the lay people, to get to know us. And how we do it at Wat Nanachat is a draw. Once you'd finish giving your Dhamma talk, you pick a name out of the bag, and then that person has to go next. And so for everyone, it's a fun night. But for me, it was just terrifying. And I don't know why, I was always one of the last people to go. So I was just sitting on the asana with all this anxiety the whole time. And then after that, I went to go stay with Luang Por Biak for a number of years. And at Luang Por Biak's monastery, he is the standard, only he gives the Dhamma talks, which was great. I really liked that. And so didn't have to give the end of Pansa Dhamma talk. It was just him giving the talks. And so then afterwards, I had to, when my Thai visa was finished, I had to leave the country for a while. And I went to stay in Australia, went back to Thailand, then went to Australia again and stayed at one of my friend's monasteries near Sydney. It's a Bodhisattva monastery. And it's a branch monastery of Ajahn Nando. And so I'm friends with all the monks there. And this one time, I'm been a monk for 10 years now. I'm an Ajahn now. And Ajahn Nando comes to visit. And we're sitting having tea with Ajahn Nando, very relaxed thing. And then one of the monks goes, "Oh, Ajahn Nando, Nando's 10 pansas and he's never given a Dhamma talk before." I'm just inside, I'm just thinking, oh no. And Ajahn Nando's like, "What? You haven't? Okay, you've got to start giving Dhamma talks." And so, and he gave me advice for how to do it and stuff. And that was what brought me to start giving Dhamma talks and start giving teachings. So with that being what brought me to giving Dhamma talks and why I started giving Dhamma talks, one of the questions is then, when people come to listen to Dhamma talks, why do people come to listen to Dhamma? What's the point? What's the benefit of listening to Dhamma? Some people will have different reasons. Some people it might be, well, I come because my wife made me. Some people it's just a fun morning out. But the Buddha actually talked about different reasons why we should listen to Dhamma and different benefits we can get from listening to Dhamma talks. So the first one he said is that, we learn things that we haven't heard before. So, back in the time of the Buddha, they didn't write down any of the Dhamma. They didn't put it into a book. It was all memorized. And so all the monks had memorized it. So the only way to really learn Dhamma was to actually listen to it, listen to someone teaching it. And so that's, you learn something you haven't learned before. You learn about the Four Noble Truths. You learn about these different teachings. And the second one, the Buddha said, was things we've heard before. It makes them more clear. It can clarify them. And so sometimes what happens is, you've heard a teaching, you've heard a concept in Buddhism, but you don't really quite understand it. So you might have heard it, but you don't really understand it. So I remember when I was a novice at Wat Nanachat, we used to have this one layman who'd come to the monastery almost every weekend. And he was super nice, he was super helpful, very faithful, would meditate, morning and evening chanting, he did the whole thing. And then I remember one time he came up to me and he's like, I just don't understand dukkha. And even though, he's chanted about it, he's heard these teachings about it, but he didn't quite understand it. So, this can happen to us. We've heard a teaching and we don't understand it. So by listening to Dhamma, and a lot of times listening to it more than just one time, can help clarify these points. And so you guys actually have a really nice setup here, and you guys are very lucky because you have so many different adjunts, so many different teachers coming, that sometimes they'll teach it in a slightly different way. They'll approach it from a different way, or maybe have a different point. And then all of a sudden, you're like, oh, I get it now. Yeah, I've been hearing this for a while, but now it makes sense to me. And so this is another one of these, the benefits the Buddha said of listening to Dhamma talks. And the third one the Buddha said was, it can clear up our doubts and get rid of our doubts. Because, some people, just their character is very doubting character. You see some people who, they're going to work in the morning and they lock the door of their house, and then, before they've even gotten to walk to their car, they've got to walk back and check again. They just doubt. They just really want to make sure. So it can be like that with people, with Dhamma. You hear a teaching once and you're like, well, did I get that right? Did I hear it right? Did I understand it right? And so by listening repeatedly, listening to Dhamma, you can really clear up those doubts. So when I was a layman, the city I come from in Canada, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and there wasn't much of a Buddhist scene there at that time. So when I started to want to do meditation retreats, I had to go all the ways to Ajahn Sona's monastery, which is about 2,000 kilometers away. So it's almost like you guys going to Thailand to do a retreat. And I started out with one, the Absolute Beginner's Retreat. That was the name of it. So it was absolutely simple, bare bones in the beginning. But I did it 3 times because I wanted to really make sure I understood the basics of meditation, that I got it really clear. I wanted to clear up those doubts. And it was also really nice staying at his monastery. It's in a beautiful spot in Canada. So again, this is another one of these benefits, is it can really clear up our doubts. Another one is it can straighten our views. So even though we've heard a teaching and we believe a teaching, maybe deep down we're not really like seeing the world that way. It's not really the way we're approaching things or seeing things. So and so by listening to things, repeatedly, listening to the Dhamma again, it's going to start soaking in. It's going to start absorbing. So we might hear teachings like killing is wrong. We hear all these teachings about how we shouldn't kill, we shouldn't, even kill insects and stuff. And, we believe it, we understand it, we believe it. But then, a mosquito lands on us and we slap it right away, right? So we haven't really straightened the views on that. So by listening to it repeatedly, it's going to start soaking in, it's going to start straightening our views. And that's one of the ways that with the Dhammas, it does just soak in, we just absorb it. So Ajahn Jayasaro likes to tell this story of this old lady. This is in Thailand, way back in the day, and this old lady who likes to go to the monastery and listen to the Dhamma talks. And one day she came back after being at the monastery listening to the talk, and her grandson started talking to her, and he was asking her, "Oh, Grandma, what did the monks talk about? What were they teaching you at the monastery?" And she's like, "Yeah, I don't really remember." And he's asking, he's like, "Well, why go to the monastery if you're not even remembering?" So she orders him to take a basket, like a woven bamboo basket, take it down to the stream and bring her back a basket full of water. And he's like, "What? Well, this is silly. I'm not going to do that." And then she yells at him, "You go do that." So he goes to the stream and starts trying to fill up this basket with water. He's trying again and again and again, dipping it in the water, trying to lift up the water, and it just doesn't work. The water's falling out. So he comes back to her and he gives her the basket and is like, "You see, I couldn't get any water." And she's like, "No, you're wrong. Look at that. The wood is absolutely saturated with water." So it can be like with the Dhamma too. We get saturated with it and we don't even realize it. And then the fifth benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk is it makes the mind serene. So a lot of times, while we're listening to Dhamma talks, it can be almost like a guided meditation, that we're listening, the Dhamma's coming in. We don't have to be focused on trying to memorize every word that the Ajahn said or remember every point, especially nowadays, because so many of the talks are recorded that we can just go listen later and if we want to get specific points, but to really just absorb it. And, in Thailand, the Ajahns always say, listen with your heart. There was this, famous quote by Luang Por Cha. He said, when you listen to the Dhamma, don't listen with your ears, listen with your heart. Or, Luang Tam Mahabua would say, when you're listening to a Dhamma talk, that the Dhamma outside is coming in and it's mixing with the Dhamma inside. So when you listen, it'll make your mind calm, make your mind happy, make your mind serene. And, this is another benefit of listening to the Dhamma talks. So the Buddha gave these 5 as the benefits. But a lot of these to really get the benefit, we've got to listen to them, again and again, and it's not just a one-time thing. So, for stuff like straightening our views and getting rid of doubts, that just doesn't happen one time. Back in the time of the Buddha, there were some monks that happened to, they'd listen to just one Dhamma teaching and, they'd be enlightened at the end of that. But we're not like that. When I lived with Luang Por Biak, he used to say this, he'd be like, he'd be talking about the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first teaching that the Buddha ever gave. And he was talking about how at the end of it, the Venerable Kondanya, attains Sotapanna and becomes known as Anya Kondanya. And Luang Por Biak would say, well, the monks here, they've listened to this sutta hundreds of times and they've chanted it thousands of times, and not one of them attains Sotapanna doing that. So then he'd encourage us to practice. But then when we do listen to a Dhamma talk, the Buddha actually taught us how to listen to a Dhamma talk. So it's, you're like, well, how to, just open my ears and listen, but the Buddha really taught us how to listen to get the most benefit from it. And so the first thing he said was not to have contempt for the teaching. So this can really happen to us, that sometimes when we just, we have negativity towards, either listening to the talk or the particular thing the person is talking about. So, for example, you might not want to be there at the talk. It might be, oh yeah, I was forced to come. I really don't want to be here. So, this can sometimes happen when you're a junior monk at Wat Pananachat and a lot of the Wapapong monasteries. There's the standard that on the Wan Pra, so the new moon, the full moon, and the half moons, these are the holy days in Thailand, that we have to sit and practice all night long and listen to a Dhamma talk, and sometimes it can go on for hours. So, you get to the point where you're tired, you're sore, you just don't want to be there, and you're like, oh, why is Ajahn still talking? I just want this to end. And so, when you get that type of mindset, you're not really absorbing anything which is being taught. You're not really paying attention to it. You actually just have aversion towards it. Or it could be, about a subject we don't want to hear about. So, you could be like, oh, Ajahn's talking about that again. He always talks about that. The first time I went to go stay with a really big Kruba Ajahn, a really respected teacher, there was another monk there from Canada, and he he was quite a bit senior to me, and so he became a bit of like my mentor when I was there. And one of the first things he told me, he's like, yeah, when you live with a Kruba Ajahn, sometimes you just hear the same things again and again. It's not every Dhamma talk is like new, fresh teachings. It's just, sometimes it's just really hammering in those things again. So, if when he does talk and you're just like, oh, here he goes again, you're not going to really get the benefit from that. Or if it's, something like the Ajahn starts talking about sila, and maybe you're having some difficulties with sila right now. Maybe you've been telling lies, or killing mosquitoes or something, and you just don't want to hear about that. So you start just shutting down and not really absorbing what is said. And the next thing the Buddha said was not to have contempt for the teacher. So sometimes we may when already have like a bias against the teacher, already have like a view on them. It might be like, oh, who's this Ajahn Nando? He's not famous. What am I going to listen to him? Or you might see someone and be like, oh, that monk, he's not from the tradition I usually listen to. I usually like, Ajahn Chah tradition monks, and that monk's from a Burmese tradition, so I'm not going to listen. Or it might be, that monk's a study monk, not a forest monk, and then you just right away you shut down. And but they may still have really good teachings. They may still know what they're talking about, or again, they may be able to teach from an angle that you didn't expect, and it's going to be beneficial. So, or if you maybe just personally don't like that Ajahn for some reason, maybe you've had a bad experience with him, and you're just like, yeah, just here he goes. But again, you want to be open to it, because if you shut down like that, you're not going to benefit from what they say. And the third one, the Buddha said, was not to have contempt for yourself. So this one's really interesting. And I notice, especially teaching in the West, when I'm teaching in Canada and other places, this is a big problem a lot of times that people can have, is they're really hard on themselves. They're really self-critical. They really put themselves down. The stuff people say to themselves and, their internal monologue, their thinking about themselves, if they were to actually say that out loud to someone else, everyone would be like, oh man, you're kind of mean, or you're, it would be just unrealistic standards we have for ourselves. And we can really be negative. And if when we're listening to Dhamma, if we're like that, if say, the person teaching starts talking about meditation and you're like, oh, well, I'm no good at meditation. Or start thinking, oh, I'll never be able to get to that point. What's the use? Again, you're not going to be absorbing what they're saying. And the Buddha said that we can become enlightened. He said, if you guys couldn't do these things, I wouldn't teach it to you. So so the Buddha, he gave this guarantee we can do it. And so it's really good not to look down on ourselves and be overly critical or overly negative about ourselves, because again, we're just not going to get the real benefit of listening to a Dhamma talk. And the next thing the Buddha said was, when we listen to a Dhamma talk, we shouldn't have a mind which is scattered and all over the place, and unfocused. So you just look at it, in anything in life when you're trying to do a task. Say you're at work, you're trying to do a project, but your mind's all over the place. Say you maybe had a few too many cups of coffee in the morning, or maybe you, there's some kind of problem going on in life or something, or you just, were, I don't know, playing a video game or something beforehand. Your mind is really active, really scattered, going here and there. It's hard to really focus on what's being said or what's being done. So it's the same with a Dhamma talk. If someone's teaching like I'm talking right now, and you can't stop thinking about who won the football game, or who's or what's going on in world politics or something like that. Again, it's going to be very difficult to get the real benefit of it. That's why you see in a lot of places, a lot of monasteries, usually before we have a Dhamma talk, before we listen to a Dhamma talk, there's usually some chanting, some meditation, and this is to help us calm our mind down, get our mind focused, so we can really start absorbing what's being taught to us. And the fifth one was, And the fifth one was not to attend inappropriately. So this one sounds kind of strange, but so sometimes even if you're paying attention to the Dhamma talk, you like the Ajahn, you've got all those other first four going. Sometimes you might be paying attention to the wrong thing in the talk. So an example was when I was a junior monk, there was this one more senior monk, and he was telling me about he was living with this one Kruba Ajahn. And he had so much faith in this Ajahn. It was really his teacher. He really practiced hard, everything. Loved listening to the Dhamma of this teacher. But when the Ajahn would give a Dhamma talk, every once in a while he liked to use this one quote from the suttas, from the Dhammacakka Sutta. But the Ajahn would misquote it. Instead of saying, he would say that the Buddha said this. But actually in the sutta, the Buddha didn't say it. It was the Venerable Kondanya, he realized it. And so, this Ajahn gives a Dhamma talk, and he mentions that quote again and misquotes it again. And this monk I know, after the Dhamma talk, he was telling me, this had happened years earlier. He goes up to the Ajahn and very respectfully is like, Kagat Ajahn Kap, in that Dhamma talk, you actually misquoted it. The Buddha didn't say that. The Venerable Kondanya, he actually realized it. And this Ajahn apparently just sat there and didn't say a word. And as the monk told me, he's like, the Ajahn looked at me as if I was the stupidest person who's ever lived. Because he had completely missed the whole point. So instead of getting this really beautiful teaching from the Ajahn, he had just focused on this very minor misquote. And just either from fault finding with the Ajahn, or his intention was to really try to show the Ajahn that he really knows his suttas and stuff. And so he had just completely missed the point. So when he was listening, he was attending inappropriately. I remember Ajahn Vihara was telling us once, he was giving a talk somewhere, and he was talking about impermanence and not self. And he was talking about how the body's not self. And he was saying, all the cells in your body, they replace themselves and are changed every 7 years. And he said, it was somewhere in the West, and one of the laymen interrupted and talked then. And he's like, actually, Ajahn, there's some cells which take a little bit longer to replace themselves. And again, completely missing the point of the talk. So it's important, it's important not to be attending inappropriately. And so when the Buddha taught these, he actually taught this list of 5 in 2 parts. One part was saying, you won't get the benefit if you have these qualities, these 5 qualities, like if your mind is scattered, if you're attending inappropriately, if you're having contempt for the teacher. And then he taught it again, you will get the best quality, the best results, the best benefits from this talk if you have, and he taught the opposites, not having contempt for the teacher. And I think one of the reasons why he taught it like this was because sometimes, we hear a teaching like that and we're like, oh, well, maybe I do have contempt for this teacher, or maybe I am hard on myself, so I just can't benefit from the talk, and but we can change that. So a big part of our Dhamma practice and why we're coming here is to develop our minds, is to take control of our minds. So instead of our minds, being in control of us, we're in control now. Our mind is a tool we can use. I remember when I was a layman, I was a teenager, and I just started getting into Buddhism. One of the teachings I had read that really hit home to me was this: we don't have to believe our thoughts. We don't, just because we're thinking in a way, we don't have to always think that way. So, we can change them through our practice, through our wise reflection. We can start, reflecting like, oh, actually, yeah, I'm not so bad. I can do this. I actually have some really good qualities. Or, yeah, actually, maybe this Ajahn does know what he's talking about. And so we can actively start to change that. When I was a novice, Lumpur Pasno came to visit the monastery. This was at Wat Pananachat. And I had met Lumpur Pasno when I was Bacau, so it was a while, maybe about a year earlier. But, there's a bit of connection. We're from the same place. We come from the same province in Canada. And actually, when I was a little kid, I went to the same church his uncles went to. My mom knows them, and my dad knows people who went to school with him. So, it's kind of a small place, right? And so I go to his kuti that he's staying in and have a chat with him. And I told him, I'm having problems being inspired right now. And he told me this teaching, which has stuck to me ever since. He said, inspiration is a skill. And, and this just really hit to me because I always thought that I should just be inspired. I'm living in a monastery, I'm practicing Dhamma, everyone else here, I've got this great community practicing with me. I should just be inspired. Or it should be the responsibility of external things to inspire me. But that's not how it is. This is a skill. We learn to inspire ourselves. So it's the same with these qualities. When we go to listen to a Dhamma talk, these are skills we learn and we develop ourselves. And so we just have to put the effort into it, take the time to do it, and be really patient with ourselves with it too. Again, a lot of times with Dhamma practice, we want quick results, and this can be one of the biggest obstacles in practice, is that, if we're not getting the results quick enough, we get hard on ourselves or we just want to give up. It's very similar to, with fitness. Someone goes to the gym and they want to get in good shape. They want to get big and buff. Like, I don't know who is now, but my day it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, was the big buff person. So if someone wants to start looking like that, it takes time, and a lot of people, they'll go to the gym, they'll start working out for a few weeks, really go full on into it, but they don't get the results fast enough, so they give up on it. And it's very similar with practice, so we just have to be really patient with ourselves and really work on that and just keep putting effort into it and make our practice continuous. So I would like to offer that to everyone as a reflection for this morning.